Abram was a nomad. Abram had absolutely no place that he could call home. Abram really did nothing more than follow his herds and his flocks as they looked for green pasture and fresh water. Abram's job, more than anything else, was to keep those herds and flocks together so that they didn't get scattered across the countryside. And God speaks to Abram, promising to give to him a place that he can call home, and as well descendants as numerous as the stars of the sky. Abram, knowing well humanity, wants proof that what God says is coming from God and that it is to be trusted. So God invites Abram into a covenant ceremony. Abram goes, procures the animals that God requires. He splits them in two, lays them side by side. And as the day closes, God once more makes his promises, and God comes and walks through the middle of those animals, consuming them by fire. And it is in the midst of that covenant celebration, that sacrifice, that Abram is given trust to believe the words that God has spoken, hope that he will see the day when those words are completed and fulfilled. He will have a land to call his own. He will have descendants as numerous as the stars of the sky. And it is precisely because of that hope and trust that was given to Father Abraham, that reading is given to Holy Mother Church today on this second Sunday of Lent. We are invited, as Abram was invited, to hope and to trust that the promises that God has made to us will be fulfilled and all will be well. The gospel passage from St. Luke is very much along the same lines. Jesus has chosen Peter, James, and John to go with him up onto the mountain so that they can be there with him as Jesus prays to the Father. And what an incredible witness as they see Jesus transfigured before them, as the Father reveals his Son as the Son of God, the Messiah, the one who has been promised, the one who is complete fulfillment of Old Testament law and prophecy, the one who, in his transfiguration, is a complete recreation of the entire created order. And Peter, James, and John, witnessing this scene, are filled with hope and trust, because the words that Jesus speaks to them, they now believe will come true. They are filled with hope. They can't possibly understand all that they've just seen, but now they have the opportunity to see with different eyes, to hear with different ears, and to grow in understanding of all that Jesus says and does and is. And so with this passage from Luke today, on this second Sunday of Lent, we too are invited to trust and hope that we as well will grow in our understanding of who Jesus is and who we are as the body of Christ present today in our world to bring about the transfiguration of the world that Jesus demonstrated in his own body. And the very reason for all of these things is there in the reading from St. Paul. Paul is bold. Paul is insightful. Paul says, he writes, our citizenship is in heaven. As Christians baptized in Jesus Christ, we don't belong here. Our citizenship is in heaven. Yet each and every one of us, and myself included, falls into that tremendous temptation to call this place home. Each and every one of us begins to think that we own some little part of this place, that this is where God has placed us for all eternity. But that is not the case. Paul has said to us, written to us, that our citizenship is in heaven. And through the transfiguration of Jesus, the early disciples were given an indication of how they were to get from here to heaven. In the transfiguration of Jesus, they began to understand that passing through the cross and the suffering and the death in Jerusalem was what would get them to the glory of the kingdom where they truly do and did belong. The same is true for us today. Each and every one of us must cross the bridge that is the cross of Jesus in order to enter into the glory of the kingdom that has been promised, in which we trust and place our hope. And all of this talk of bridge, we've heard it so much this past week. So I brought the newspaper. I wanted to quote the Holy Father and to make sure that I got the quote correct. A person who thinks only about building walls wherever they may be and not building bridges is not Christian. Sound familiar? How many times have we heard it repeated over and over and over on the TV and in the newspapers? All this week. But how incredibly rich and incredibly true from the mouth of the Holy Father. A person who thinks only about building walls wherever they may be and not building bridges is not Christian. After hearing this and reading this throughout the week, I did a little bit of reflecting on what we, as a culture, as a society, as people, have done in our own history. And I thought about the walls of bigotry and prejudice and hatred and fear that established the Jewish ghetto of Warsaw, and how those walls closed in on the people who lived there until they were annihilated. And I thought about the communist wall that separated Berlin, producing a prison for both sides of that city. The communists who could not get out, those in West Berlin who had to live every day with the sight of that wall separating families and lives and killing hope and creating mistrust and not trust. And I thought further about those same walls that created Watts in Los Angeles, that created Harlem in New York, that created the wards in Houston, and the walls that were created by those same feelings that created the inner city of Detroit, and the walls that made prisoners of the people who lived within them, unable to get out, and the prisoners who lived outside the walls, unable to enter into meaningful relationship with the people on the inside. And I thought about the wall along the Texas border, built by fear, by prejudice, by hatred. And I reflected on the walls that go up inside families when people simply cannot get along with one another, when resentment gives way to hatred or fear, when entitlement causes such grave difficulties between brothers and sisters. If the Transfiguration is to mean absolutely anything to us at all in our time and in our day, then we, the body of Christ, have to be actively at work in tearing down the walls that have been set up around us. We, the body of Christ, called forward to be transfigured and transformed and to enter into the glory of the kingdom, have to tear down all those walls so that we can share that kingdom, that glory, with all our brothers and sisters. The Transfiguration is our light and our salvation. It is what gives us hope and invites us to trust in the promises made by God through Jesus Christ, that we might all be one. One holy, Catholic, apostolic people, called into the glory of God's kingdom, filled with light, and working together for the salvation of absolutely all of creation. As we celebrate Transfiguration, we have to let go of our fear. We have to trust. We hope.